All right, this morning, the country is processing the historic bank failures of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank while trying to understand how widespread the ripple effects from those closures could be.
Yeah, yesterday, President Biden announced a federal intervention program to stop the financial hemorrhaging caused by the bank's collapse. And he highlighted steps that he says his administration is taking to prevent further fallout. He also reassured Americans that their money is safe and that they wouldn't be stuck footing the bill to rescue depositors of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank.
Americans can rest assured that our banking system is safe. Your deposits are safe. Let me also assure you, we will not stop at this. We'll do whatever is needed. No losses will be, and this is an important point, no losses will be borne by the taxpayers.
Still, that news did little to put investors at ease on Wall Street. Bank stocks suffered heavy losses yesterday, ending the trading day in the red. And this morning, there's more fallout for SVB. The bank's parent company, along with two top executives, are being sued by shareholders in a class action lawsuit for fraud. We're going to hear from a small business owner who was directly affected by the bank failure in just a moment. But first, let's get to NBC News White House correspondent Carol Lee and Brian Sozzi, executive editor at Yahoo Finance. Brian, let's start with you. It was not exactly a good day on Wall Street for regional banks. We saw those losses yesterday. Did we expect those losses, or was that a little surprising?
Well, thank you for having me. And what you're seeing really is the loss of trust in what financial institutions essentially do. And that is why you saw shares of a First Republic really get hammered. But you also saw the likes of a Charles Schwab, one of the longtime just investment firms on Wall Street, their shares get hit as well. So lots of fear and contagion in the aftermath, what the financials might look like for a lot of these banks. That's why you saw the stocks sell off. Now, we are seeing a little bit of rally here in the pre-market today. But again, the fear on Wall Street very much remains out of there. And the next shoe to drop, guys, could be when these companies, these big banks, report earnings in just a few weeks. How were their finances hurt by the fallout of SVB?
So, Carol, let's bring you in here. We just heard that clip from the president announcing plans to protect depositors. He also called out a 2018 bank deregulation law that was passed under the Trump administration. He called on Congress to reverse it. What's the reaction, Ben, from lawmakers to that, and overall just to how the White House is handling this?
Well, it's mixed, as you would expect. There are falls along party lines in many ways. But what you've heard from Democrats, Joe, is that they're supportive of this. They think the president made the right decision. However, they really want to get to the bottom of what happened here with the collapse of these banks. You heard from Senator Elizabeth Warren writing this sort of "I told you so" op-ed in the New York Times, saying that that 2018 law you just mentioned needs to be reversed. You had some Republicans who are saying that this is the administration playing politics, that if it was a different type of company, if it wasn't a tech-focused company, that they wouldn't have come in and rescued this bank. And so they're calling this a bailout, which is something the White House rejects and does not want the president's actions to be labeled as. And then you've heard from senators like Mitt Romney, who said that the president made the right decision. So the president and his team have been briefing lawmakers. The president's calling for Congress to take action, whether it's that 2018 law, reversing that, or passing new other regulations that tighten up rules on how these banks operate. That's going to be a fight going forward. And look, it's a fight, politically speaking, that the president probably wants to have as he heads into potentially a re-election campaign.
Brian, you mentioned fear. There is a concern that other banks could be vulnerable. Is that a legitimate fear? I mean, what is next for the banking industry?
Well, the banking industry, like I just mentioned, is going through will likely go through a week or two of really heightened volatility. If you are a bank, what does this fallout mean for the treasury securities that you're trading? What does it mean for the stocks you are trading for clients? Now, I am surprised you did not see the market completely fall out of bed yesterday in the wake of this. And that is, I think, in large part the reflection of what the government did, essentially come in here and backstop depositors. But it doesn't mean all is fine on Wall Street. Volatility is back in these markets. And, oh, yeah, it comes at the same time where markets are still trying to figure out where in the world is inflation going and how might the Federal Reserve respond in next week when it has its next meeting. If they raise rates even 25 basis points, you could see tremors come back to this market.
And Carol, I mean, President Biden said yesterday there will be consequences for banks that collapse. Quickly here, what are some of the steps the White House is considering?
Well, one of the things we've seen, and this is not related to the president, Joe, is the Federal Reserve saying it's going to review its oversight of SVB, for instance. Other things that the president is looking at, look, he suggested that there's going to be big consequences here. He said nobody is above the law. There's that lawsuit that you mentioned, but that's different than what the president is suggesting, which is that they will look at whether there were any criminal potential activities by executives at this bank, things that they could be looking at, like what were stock sales looking like in the month before the bank failed. So things like that. But the president's setting the bar pretty high here.
All right, Carol Lee and Brian Sozzi, thank you both for kicking us off this hour. We appreciate it.
And joining us now is Vanessa Pham, a business owner who banked with SVB. She's the co-founder of the food business OmSom. Thank you so much for being with us this morning, Vanessa. I imagine you are still trying to process the last few days, but can you tell us what it's been like for you mentally and from a business perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's truly been an unprecedented experience, probably some of the hardest days in the business and, candidly in my life, just moving through this really challenging time with a lot of uncertainty for a business that, my sister and I started a few years ago. And I feel like as the daughters of Vietnamese refugees, that plays a huge part in our story and impacted our experience of the whole series of events. But yeah, we tried to make decisions, move as quickly as possible towards solutions as soon as the news started unfolding. But it felt like, circumstances were changing every hour. That being said, we ultimately decided to lean into our values as much as we can and communicate openly and transparently with everybody around the table for our company, including our community, our partners, and our investors.
President Biden was quick to speak out on this. We have already seen some government action, talk of different levels of action. Do you feel like the response to this has been adequate so far? And moving forward, what do you want to see the government do here?
Yeah, I'm still taking in all the inputs around, potential lawsuits. I think where I stand just as a small business owner and what I'm hoping to see, definitely the news that came out on Sunday night made all the difference for my company and many other companies, all the way from big tech to, smaller companies like mine. And so I'm very grateful for that personally. Going forward, I definitely am concerned about the state of the banking system and the stability there. And so we're doing everything in our power to manage that and would love to see the government support businesses like ours.
You also posted an open letter on social media. You asked in part for people to continue supporting small businesses like yours. You touched on this earlier about leaning into the values you and your sister have for this company. But what do you think is going to be next for you as an individual, as a business owner, and also for the totality of your business?
Yeah, I think we're going to be more prudent about how we store our funds. But beyond that, we have to be super focused on what's most important, which is growing our business, bringing more people into our universe. So we're selling our sauces in Whole Foods and Target and on our website. And our story has been, one that's resonated with consumers. So we're really focused on that. And it's become extremely clear to us that going forward, yes, we're relying on a broader system of structures, but there's also a lot of inequities there and a lot of instability there. So we're really leaning into community first and foremost to get through this really challenging time.
All right, Vanessa Pham, co-founder of OmSom, thank you so much for your time, and we wish the best for you and your sister.
Thank you.
Now to our other big story, the weather. Two major storms are expected to batter both coasts this morning with no relief in sight for an already drenched California. In Monterey County, the situation is becoming dire.
Yeah, officials there are racing to repair a levee that broke over the weekend after an atmospheric river slammed the area. Now officials warn the breached levee could widen from 120 feet to 300 feet as a result of a second atmospheric river set to make landfall in Southern California later today. More than 30 million people are now under flood alerts because of the incoming storm system. And here in the Northeast, cities are preparing for snowfall as a slow-moving nor'easter closes in. According to the Weather Prediction Center, some regions will get up to 18 inches of snow and coastal flooding. New York Governor Kathy Hochul is asking residents to take the storm seriously.
People in upstate say, well, snow's coming, another snowstorm. I've lived my whole life with snowstorms, but this is one we're cautioning people that this could be deadly. It is very, very hard to plow the roads when there are people in front of you or cars that insisted on venturing out and end up in a ditch and have to be rescued.
We have meteorologist Angie Lastman standing by to give us an update on where the storm is headed next. But first, NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton is in Worcester, Massachusetts with the latest on the nor'easter. So, Antonia, what are you seeing so far on the ground this morning?
Good morning, Joe. Well, the cold rain that we had here yesterday has changed over to thick, heavy snow that's now coming down this morning. And this is the stuff that public works officials here in Worcester have been warning people about. This is the kind of sticky, heavy snow that stays on the ground. It accumulates. It makes it really difficult for them to get trucks out on the road to clear otherwise hazardous conditions. And so they're asking people, if you don't have to travel today, you don't have to hit the road, you don't have to commute into work, please stay home. If you absolutely have to get out there, they're reminding people that in these kinds of conditions, you need to make sure you have an emergency kit in your vehicle. You want to have batteries, you want to have a flashlight, you want to make sure all your devices are charged up so you can get in contact with people in case anything happens to you. They're expecting that these kinds of conditions are going to complicate not just the morning commute, but possibly well into the afternoon as well, because here in this part of the state in central Massachusetts, they're expecting about 10 to 20 inches of snow possibly. And the winter storm warning is going to be in effect until about 8 a.m. tomorrow. And so if you don't have to go out today, they're really warning people to be careful. They have about 325 trucks that are going to be just in this area alone trying to clear the road. But those officials are warning it's going to be tough for them. And it may be a while before these hazardous conditions are cleared and it's safe to get out there, Joe.
Officials have had a few days to prepare for this, though it's unclear exactly how much snow they're going to get. But how have officials been preparing for this big snowfall?
Well, they're warning people that power outages are very likely in conditions like this, because right now we're seeing the heavy snow, but we're also likely going to get some serious gusts of wind that could get up to 55 miles per hour. So that means, trees coming down. It means possible power outages. And so not only should people be ready for that at home, thankfully this is an area where a lot of people have things like backup generators, but it means you need to make sure that you have supplies and certainly run your last errands right now if you need to. The good news is National Grid has been preparing already for this for days. So they have about 1,000 crews, 3,000 workers on standby, ready to respond if it gets to that point, Joe.
And for the past couple days, we've heard governors throughout the Northeast issuing warnings. We just heard from Governor Hochul in New York. What are you hearing from the governor in Massachusetts, and are people heeding the warning?
Well, what we've heard from the governor here, Maura Healey, is a reminder that if you can work from home, you really should today. Again, it all comes down to these hazardous conditions and concerns about there being pileups. They don't want cars that don't need to be on the road to be on the road. There's a parking ban here in Worcester and other parts of the state that are in effect simply because they want vehicles to clear as much space as possible. So she has asked for non-emergency employees to please stay home. Any members of her executive branch to stay home and telework today, and to kind of set an example for others. Some of the residents that I've spoken to are planning to take that advice and are teleworking in cases. But of course, there are people here who have to work. So they've also been told that if you have to, try to get on the road early before things potentially get, more complicated, more sticky than they already are.
Antonia Hilton, where the snow is already falling in Massachusetts. Antonia, thank you.
Meteorologist Angie Lastman is here now with more on these powerful storms.
Hey there, Angie. Good morning.
Good morning, guys. We've got two of them. They're basically bookending the country. And of course, we have that atmospheric river that has been relentless all winter long. This is the next atmospheric river event that we're going to watch: flooding, damaging winds, power outages likely for parts of California. But we've got to start with the nor'easter. You just heard Antonio talking about it. We have the heavy rain. We have the heavy snow working into parts of the Northeast. And this is a long haul kind of event. This isn't just an early morning kind of thing that we'll deal with today. This will last into parts of tomorrow. The rain right now stretched from Boston down into portions of New York. We're going to see some of that transition over into snow, though. But if you look a little farther to the inland areas, there is heavy snow already falling. The winter alerts have been up, and they are up for 23 million people right now up and down the Northeast. Here's what we're expecting as far as impacts are concerned. We're going to talk about the snow, but let's talk about the strong winds first. We'll see gusts anywhere from 30 to 40 miles per hour as you get get a little closer to the coast, they'll be even higher. Atlantic City expecting to approach a gust of 50 miles per hour. Parts of Montauk as well, close to 50 miles per hour. That means coastal erosion, coastal flooding. Those will be some minor concerns for us, but it also means the possibility of power outages when you have that heavy, wet snow landing on tree branches. Down trees, down branches are all possible, which means down power lines as well. How about the snow? Really impressive rates that we'll get. Anywhere from 2 to 3 inches per hour is likely in a lot of places. The Catskills could total up to 3 feet. And you'll notice those higher elevations are where we're going to see the higher totals as we go through the day today and into tomorrow. Elsewhere, places like Scranton, 6 to 10 inches you can expect there. Albany, 8 to 16 inches. A little closer to the coast, Boston will eventually transition over from the rain to the snow and end up with anywhere from 3 to 7 inches. And again, this is really heavy snow, so it'll be troublesome when it comes to even shoveling or clearing those roadways. Something to watch for. As we move to the West Coast, there's that next atmospheric river event. This one is going to bring more rain, more flooding, and it's up and down the coast. It's not just focused to northern and central California. Los Angeles could pick up anywhere around 3 inches over the next day or so. They, of course, are going to be dealing with some flooding concerns, as well as up the coast into places like San Francisco. We see the high risk of flash flooding for numerous locations today. We have the swollen waterways. We have the really saturated grounds. It's not going to be very hard to get some of this additional flooding through the state of California. Some of those amounts come in anywhere from 6 to 8 inches in the LA Mountains coastal range. Same kind of range there with 6 to 8 inches in the Sierra foothills, anywhere from 6 to 8 as well. On top of that, the strong winds. This isn't just the Northeast dealing with the winds. This is also a system on the West Coast that's going to impact folks. 14 million people with these wind alerts, and you can see why. Anywhere from 30 to 40 mile per hour winds, up to 50 as we look towards Monterey. So this is again a situation where the down trees, down power lines will be something to watch for over the next day or so. Eventually the system does move to the east and we'll see some snow for parts of the Rockies, but we'll get an additional 4 to 6 feet of snow in parts of the Sierra.
And they've already got plenty there right now.
They sure do.
All right, thanks, Angie. Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Angie.
Former President Donald Trump made his first appearance in Iowa since announcing he was running for the White House again. Speaking before a packed crowd in Davenport yesterday, Trump discussed several issues while frequently unloading on Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in a series of attacks.
Yeah, this rally came just hours after Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, testified before a New York grand jury in an investigation into hush money payments made to adult film star Stormy Daniels during the 2016 presidential campaign. Here to discuss all of this is NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray and NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos. Thank you both for joining us. Mark, let's start with you. Walk us through what we heard from Trump yesterday. How did the crowd react to those attacks on DeSantis?
Yeah, Ellison, last night we ended up hearing former President Donald Trump's probably harshest critiques and remarks aimed at Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Donald Trump ended up hitting Ron DeSantis on DeSantis' past support for restructuring entitlement programs like Medicare and Social Security. And Donald Trump also took aim at Ron DeSantis' past opposition to subsidies for ethanol, which you know is a key industry in Iowa. Take a listen to his remarks.
Ron DeSantis strongly opposed ethanol. Do you know that? And we don't even know if he's running, but I might as well tell you. If he's not running, I'll say he was fine on ethanol. Don't worry about it. He strongly opposed ethanol and fought against it at every turn, and he's going to do that again.
Ellison, though, as far as your question, how the crowd received it, it was a raucous crowd in support of Donald Trump. But when he specifically mentioned Ron DeSantis and those attacks last night, it was kind of fell on some deaf ears. There was a little bit of silence, according to our reporters on the ground, who might not have been all that interested in Republican attacks this early in the race.
Danny, this rally comes amid ongoing legal troubles for Trump. His attorney said yesterday the former president will not appear before that New York grand jury. Does his no-show impact the investigation at all?
No, not likely. I don't think anyone expected him to appear before the grand jury. Typically, if you have any kind of exposure and you're called to testify before a grand jury, you're going to exercise your Fifth Amendment and decline to appear. You work that out with your attorney and the prosecutors, but in all likelihood, he won't appear. And the prosecutors must have known that. I'm sure it was to go down. So the investigation moves forward. I don't think this impacts the conclusions very much. It was something that was expected. And in all likelihood, Trump didn't want to go either, because it's not an opportunity to grandstand. It's the opposite. Grand jury proceedings are secret. So nobody's going to hear whatever it is he has to say except for the grand jury members and pretty much nobody else.
So, Mark, how is Trump handling the investigations on the trail? Has he mentioned it? Is it having any sort of impact among his supporters?
Yeah, he definitely mentioned it in his rally in Iowa last night. He criticized the grand juries. He criticized the Biden Justice Department, as well as the prosecutors who are looking into these various matters. And Ellison, you know, it is what ends up happening legally to Donald Trump might actually be the most important unanswered question in this very, very early 2024 Republican race. It's possible that an indicted Donald Trump could end up reshaping things, could end up having Republicans maybe decide not to support him, or it could actually end up rallying Republicans to his cause. And so what ends up happening on the legal front is going to be a really, really important development.
All right. We'll keep an eye on it.
Yep. Mark, Danny, thank you both. Appreciate it.
Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell is out of the hospital following a fall at a dinner last week. A statement confirmed from his office confirmed that the 81-year-old suffered a concussion as well as a minor rib fracture during the fall. Mitch McConnell's office additionally stating that he will undergo physical therapy at an inpatient rehab facility before returning home. McConnell previously fell in 2019, fracturing his shoulder at that time.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.